Have Micah Linehan take over and present for us. This is a continuation of our ongoing Office 365 security adoption roadmap. The last time that we got together, we did a deep dive into Azure Information Protection, creating data policy and classification. And so Micah now is going to take us on the next step in that journey. Take it away, Micah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Preston. So last time we created a bunch of policies, looked at our generic policies for Azure Information Protection, and today we're going to take and show you how you can leverage those policies in other applications and ultimately do discovery and, as I like to call it, hopefully when I get around to the time of actually finishing the blog article, building logical walls within your environment. So we're going to walk through Cloud App Security today and show you how you can take AIP policies and extend with them controls around sharing links in your organization, right? So it's really easy in here or really easy in the admin center from OneDrive to say, yeah, you can't share, you can't share with people outside of your organization. That's a pretty easy switch to flip, and then all of a sudden those sharing links go nowhere. What I have been constantly getting asked about quite frequently, just in all different walks, whether it's a healthcare institution, a K through 12, or even just a generic running the business and business operations standpoint, how do I prevent the HR team from accidentally sharing some confidential information or privileged information, or how do I protect this research group or medical group is not allowed to share with anybody in the organization, or I don't want anybody in the staff or faculty to share any content accidentally with students that could, it could be, whether it could be transcripts or disciplinary actions or anything like that. We need to prevent them or kind of save them from themselves from accidentally sharing that information or oversharing that information. So, I've showed Cloud App Security a few times before. As always, we like to start with our dashboard. This dashboard's a little bit different now because we actually have content matches in here that we're actually looking at publicly shared confidential files, files that contain PCI data and detected with our built-in engine or using Azure Information Protection. So, a little bit different. We're going to transition from what we usually show, which is the user side and looking at the bad activity, bad sign-ins and some of those controls, but we're going to specifically just look at files today. And what we can see with files and how we can actually go in and modify policies and go ahead and kind of curb those events and build out those logical walls from a business and an operations standpoint to really protect the environment. So from here, I could obviously click in from a content match, but I always like to actually go directly to the investigation first, because my favorite thing to show in here is, I'm sure Preston will say he's seen it too many times now, but I used to get, everybody always asked, hey, how can we find everything that's being shared in my environment externally? And with 4 mouse clicks, we can actually do that with Cloud App Security. This works, and what I'm going to demo today, all of this works with Office 365 Cloud App Security. So if you get on that A3 platform, you can do all of this with A3. Normally it's hey, by the way, we want to get you to the A5 level. The only difference and the big difference that we have there is when we talk about A5, I can do the exact same thing with the files and the information that's there in other applications like Box or G Suite, right? So tons of power there. Again, that steps into that A5 suite because we start looking beyond Microsoft products and we start looking at it as a true cloud access broker or security broker across multiple cloud platforms. But as you can see here, as I surfaced, just by clicking on that, by design, of course, we have a bunch of policy matches, right? So if I look and click in here, I can see with the policy match. So we have a policy set today that says if we have publicly shared confidential files, I want to know about it. That's pretty important, right? When we have classifications, or we actually go ahead and look at those classifications, and if I go into advanced here, we could take it a little bit further and say, hey, I'm looking for authorization, or I'm looking for a classification label, and look at that. Wouldn't you know? Bringing it all together is the Azure Information Protection side, right? So all of those policies that I've built out, all of those PCI controls or confidential, highly confidential flags that I've built out in Azure Information Protection, extending into one of our other products, right? So again, use one policy, it works across the stack. That's the direction of the products today and where we're going. So proof in the pudding, right? I want to view confidential information. I could actually go ahead and look at, a few different, I believe this is also in confidential external is what those should show up as, and they do. So I can go ahead here and pull this out, and I get the alerts, right? But we all know that the alerting system is just half of it, right? So what's the cool thing that I want to be able to do, or I want to be able to automate, right? I want to be able to inherit the private position, inherit the parent permissions. So again, you're pulling it back in if it's not in that shared with everyone folder. You can pull that back in. We can make it private again. We can remove a collaborator. Well, if I'm looking at the collaborators and we start looking, I see a bunch of people that are here and they're internal, and then I have a public sharing link. Well, I can't really just remove a sharing link here. So how would I go ahead and do that? Now, what we'll do is go ahead and pull it in and actually remove the external users, right? So if I wanted to remove a collaborator, I could select this and I could go in and define it. As you can see, oh no, there is no sharing link revocation. So what we do is, kind of as we've done many times before in our Cloud App Security product, we'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and modify a policy, or I'll make a policy, right? So we see publicly shared confidential files. Oh man, that's those 4 files I was just looking at, right? I go ahead and look at this policy. As you can see, it's using Azure Information Protection for the classification. As I was playing with earlier and had just kind of showed you, if I wanted to, I could actually have it generate a mobile push notification, because that's all I've got going in here in Flow. But the true concept here for Flow is actually taking you that next step of remediation, not just in files and folders, but in user activity, and allowing you to kind of integrate that with your SOC playbook or other things like, kind of those fish hunter controls. That's Fish Hunter version 1. If you're familiar with it, we used Flow pretty extensively. There's a lot of integration that kind of pairs natively to that. So we could do that. We could have an alert. But really what I want to go to is I want to go ahead and, in a remediation standpoint, if I see that it is confidential or highly confidential, I don't care what level of confidential or highly confidential, I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to remove external users. And so what that does is that'll actually pull back those sharing. Now the catch here is it doesn't suppress the sending notification. We'd have to make an exchange transport rule to basically say, reject that mail message when it's being sent from this group to these users. If it contains, files that have PII, we're just going to block that message send, right? So if we don't do that, they'll still get the notification. But from a remediation standpoint, the link's dead, right? I've gone in here and I go ahead and remove the external users, or I inherit parent permissions, or remove collaborators, right? We can go ahead and remove collaborators from this, or add a classification label, or remove a classification label. So say I did, if we wanted to go ahead and modify this scope a little bit, taking it outside of just the sharing externally, I could take this same AIP policies that we have here and say I want it to be confidential or highly confidential, and it's being shared. You know what? I don't even care about the access level. I just want to make sure that it doesn't get shared to a group. So let's go ahead and look at our groups. And I just want to make sure that if I'm trying to, if I'm a file owner and I'm trying to send from the finance team, I'm not allowed to share stuff or send to people like the all employees or the all employees groups, right? So we can go ahead and I can add a bunch of different other ones in here. If they're part of the viewers team, what have you, we could scope that out. So basically what we're looking for is all files, or if I wanted to, selected folders. I could go into the selected folders and we could look at here and I could go, pull up a folder, say private, my stuff, right? We could add those in. I could click done and actually not add them, but look like I added them. Click the checkbox this time. That'll work a little bit better, right? So if I wanted to make sure that it was personal, we want to look at specific files, right? So I know that I have a finance folder. that's sitting on a SharePoint site or sitting in a team OneDrive, right? I could go in, define that. And since I know where the location is, obviously I can turn off the SharePoint because that's not going to do anything. We're just looking at the OneDrive for business. But I can go ahead of here and I could say, hey, personal, if it's good, you know, if it's being shared from personal, or we imagine that that's the finance team's home folder, I could look at it and do inspection methods, and we can look at it deeper. So we can actually use some default settings, or I can look for sensitive information types. And then, look at all of these policies that we build out. And then you have your custom ones that you can build out as well. Again, all integrated, right? So I could take financial controls, and I wanted to make sure that all of these ones are included. If I go ahead and just say all in page. So if it's in the finance folder, now we're going to look at all of these controls and all of these settings for anything in that. And if it's being shared and it contains this information from the finance team being shared to any one of the employees in my organization, I can go ahead and let's put the user in quarantine. Yeah, that sounds like fun. You know, we can let the policy match owners know. The CC additional users works pretty well. Again, if I wanted to do flow, I could also look at hierarchy, and so make sure that not only does the policy match get sent to the file owner, but I could send it to a manager. You know, inherit those parent permissions. Let's remove a collaborator. Or if it had been previously unclassified, right? Then I can go ahead and say, hey, you know, this is classified as confidential and highly confidential for all employees, or I'll build out another policy that says, hey, it's, you know, this is actually supposed to be for no one, right? Or just apply encryption and revoke those encryption rights. So a lot of capability, a lot of power here, but it's really designed around to show you that this is actually pulling the information that we did in our first kind of one of these from the security adoption roadmap. We're leveraging these signals across different products, right? So pretty cool stuff here. I'm going to kind of go ahead and show you a couple other use cases that we have from this, but really wanted to show that there are ways to control and curb the sharing of information in your organization, right? So I can go ahead and say, I don't want people from finance being able to share with all employees, or, you know, where we have a research group, right? And maybe I don't even want to care. Let's take AIP out of it for a second, right? I don't care what the content is. Let's go ahead and say, I don't care, you know, no inspection method, no folders. Let's go ahead and say all files. File owners coming from the finance team, they own the content, they're sending it, they're sharing it. You know, let's go ahead and say, I don't want anybody from finance being able to talk to our legal team. That actually would be a pretty fun conversation to do, to turn that on in real life. But a good example there, right? We can separate, you know, finance team isn't allowed to share with the legal team. And then if I wanted to create the inverse, I just do this in the opposite manner, right? I would go ahead and say, hey, finance team up here, and remove legal, and say down here I would just go with legal team, right? Pretty cool stuff. So I can go ahead and update this. We'll go ahead and control that. Ultimately, if I'm going to send a file match, I got to let somebody know, but I want to actually go ahead and inherit the parent permissions and remove a collaborator. And so I could go ahead and make sure that if it was shared with anybody in reference finance, I would put that in there and populate in a perfect world. Otherwise, we can go ahead and just inherit the private permissions here, or specifically remove those groups. One of the things that I would say, I want to call out, and I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent here, because the only thing that is fully not integrated with this yet is actually groups themselves. So if we actually go in and go to our user groups right here, I'll open this up in a new tab. For whatever reason yet, we're not fully there with doing our synchronization, and we're getting there. But if I need to import a group, obviously we have back here, obviously we have some default ones, right? We understand external users, cloud app security groups, deleted accounts, the Office 365 administrators, or non-human accounts or service accounts, right? We can control this group, we can define these are the automatic ones. As you can see for the demo, I actually went in and made sure to import our user groups. And all it does is you just got to say, I'm going to Azure AD. These are the groups I want to import and I want to look at. It doesn't, from a scoping standpoint, in the file policy, as you can see here, this has all of them. So this actually has the capability to use it. But when we're looking and selecting a user group to basically monitor or protect, that actually has to be imported. So if I went in and tried to type in Project Falcon is one that I did an import on, but if we go ahead and try and find another one, it's not going to find, collaborators or our other ones that aren't imported. So in order to get this to populate, just an important call out here, make sure that you actually do the group import, right? So if I wanted to make sure that marketing was a part of that, or I needed to protect something from marketing campaigns, or do something from launch team or project, any one of these, click on it, basically do the import, and then it'll take a minute to import. It pulls all the members in and it understands that we can go ahead and after that fact look at it. We can now see obviously we have admins in this group as well, so pretty cool, but you just have to make sure you import them, right? One of the other controls that I did want to walk through, because I just figured out how to set it all up, which I think is pretty cool, is our connections here. So within Flow, and I know that Preston has done a great job of showing you Flow and how to connect the Microsoft Graph. Well, I'm going to show you how to actually go in and create a Microsoft Cloud App Security connection. So first thing that we're going to go ahead and do up here is actually we are going to go ahead and do go into security extensions. And I got to create an API token, right? So if I go ahead and say example, it'll generate a token. I can copy it here. And now all I need to do is go over to our connections here, add a connection. And if I want to search, I probably do, just because there's a lot. Cloud App Security Preview. So I can go in here and it's going to ask me for the API key. I paste it, I hit create, and it's connected. It's rocket surgery right there for you. And so then whenever I want to go in and actually look at flows, when we see an alert generated, we can start using the outputs from it. We can actually get this rich content. If I wanted to look at that and go ahead and say, hey, we can get descriptions, links, link to the current item, label the item, view. A lot of power here, right? And then we're actually doing mobile notification. Mobile notification is just one of them, right? There's so many things that we can do in here. If we wanted to actually put this into a SOC dashboard or have it dumped to an RSS feed for a knock or something like that, you can certainly do that. But it's as easy as that as far as generating that. What I will tell you is if we go back here to the file policy, it took a little bit to see the playbooks kind of generate in here. That's just because they got to sync in between the two products, but we can go ahead here and say, hey, I want to use this. So now instead of creating, sending an email or a text message, what it's going to do is push a mobile app notification to me. Or maybe if I wanted to edit that flow and add some more content in, we could actually go in and, have it do a bunch more fun stuff. Like I said, right, RSS feeds, email notifications. We could have it look at hierarchy information of the actual user that created the alert, notify their manager, lots of power there. You can also have it, we were talking about the run books earlier in our call about, using things with Fish Hunter. Flow is actually in version 1 was used to pull these alerts in from Cloud App Security and then have them look at these run books and say, hey, make a determination and actually lock a user account out or remove a user, from their session tokens. We can obviously do that if we look at users and accounts in here and we go ahead and do policies. If I create a user policy here, obviously I can look at activity And then I get governance capabilities, right? So we can suspend user access, which blocks sign-in, and then revoke user access here as well, right? So as you can see, governance and remediation are different based on the policies that you're actually looking at. So, you know, for what we were talking about from a security adoption roadmap and a lot of those controls and what we see, you know, when we want to build those logical walls, we're going to flip over and we're going to start looking at files, right? So, you know, we can look at some of these different ones. Publicly shared confidential files actually happens to be one of the policy matches that we have. I have an HR one, a file containing PCI information. You know, if I want to, again, getting back to this, it's all together, right? I can now go ahead and, you know, one thing that I think you guys probably have seen and you're kind of asking about, or maybe you just haven't noticed it because I'm going too fast and talking too quickly, is that Cloud App Security actually has its own DLP engine in it. And so the recommendation that we have and part of this whole security adoption roadmap really centers around not using the individual engines in each of the individual products, but using the one engine, the AIP classifications, using that, using an understanding that your custom templates or your sensitive information types are now synchronized across the stack. That's the whole goal, right? So if we look at this, you know, I know that if I'm going to have to go back and look at these content controls, you know, we'll look at all of these labels here, but you know, a lot of things in here. I could actually look at, ooh, look, looks like there's one that hasn't been caught. I could look at that collaborator. It's an internal user. Okay, well, that's cool. You know, maybe he's not allowed to share with that person. Let's go ahead and inherit the private parent permissions, or let's make it private again, or remove the collaborator. I'm going to go ahead and remove the collaborator. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we'll let that run. The last step, right, in the Food Network cooking shows of these live demos is actually turning on the remediation. And look at that. Now I see that it's private again. Only the file owner has access. So we have the capability to do that right from this dashboard, which is really powerful stuff. Let's go ahead. I normally don't do that on our demos because I use it over and over and over again. But I think that's a good one. That's a fun one to do, right? That isn't my blog post, but it probably should be around this. But you know, if we want to look at collaborators here, we can start looking at, all right, well, I can do team site visitors. You know, maybe we don't want those people to be able to have access to it. A lot of capability here. If I actually go in, and I should be able to also, by clicking on the URL, last step here, if you need, from an admin standpoint, to review the content itself, right, detecting false positives, I have to give myself, obviously I have to open it in Word. That is not going to work from a live demo standpoint because my Word on my computer is tied to the Microsoft and not this demo. But because it has rights management on it, that would be kind of the little caveat there. Let's go with a different one just to show you. This one should not have IRM on it. General, external. If I fail 2 times in a row, I'm going to give up, but I could actually give myself access if I want to. So we'll do that just because. Do that, and let's go ahead. I don't remember how to do that. Right out of the gate. I have to go into the admin side, but you know, we can request access or we can review that content. I'm going to skip over that part of the cooking show today because that can be a little bit of a longer process. So with that, went through a lot of stuff, but I think that the goal of what I wanted to show you today was that not only do we have integrations into other products, right, using security extensions, using some of that playbook control here, but we're using those AIP policies to actually look at files in your organization, and we're using it with a different tool, not the AIP tool, Cloud App Security, leveraging Cloud App Security with the policies that we've already created in this previous, you know, recording and previous kind of sharing of the security adoption roadmap. A lot of power here. At the very minimum, if you don't start using the AIP side and you're on A3 or you're on Office 365, you know, one of the biggest things that we say when it comes to the security adoption roadmap is we want you to turn on auditing. We want you to turn on reporting. You need to understand what's going on in your environment. So how do we do that? We go to the Security and Compliance Center. If we have A3 or we have A5, it's right here, Office 365 Cloud App Security. If you don't have it activated, there's a checkbox right about here that says Activate Cloud App Security. One mouse click can dramatically change what you can see from a visibility of machine learning and all these different controls in your environment, because Cloud App Security is such a powerful tool. So I thank you for joining today. I'll stay on. We'll turn off the recording here, but for those of you that are watching this after the fact, thank you for watching.